What's up, people? So today's big assignment for at home is going to be about the Declaration of Independence. So I have a specific type of activity I want you to do with it, and you can do it independently, or you can do it with a group, your group on your private channel if you'd like to. But basically, we're going to be analyzing the Declaration of Independence, and our big objective. If you forgot, actually, I can probably go back a little bit to. Sorry about that. To yesterday. Um, oh shoot, messing everything up. My apologies. Anywho, so analyze the main arguments of the Declaration of Independence, or the main arguments for colonial independence. So what we're going to try to do is take that document, which is one of the seminal, most important documents in U.S. history, and try to break it down into the main arguments about why the colonists want independence. And then the big point that I try to hammer home with this is looking at kind of like what connections we can make between this document and the things that we've already learned about. So those contextual things that go on. So I'm going to go to forward a little bit to this slide. I'm sorry it keeps doing that. That's super annoying. I'm going to leave it in there. That was fun to leave in the mistakes. So, if you're not familiar with Declaration of Independence, it was drafted by the Second Continental Congress. So the Second Continental Congress met a few months after the battles of Lexington and Concord. Actually, sorry, what am I saying? Over a year after the battles of Lexington and Concord. So the First Continental Congress decided not to declare independence. They kind of extended what they call an olive branch to the British government, and they're like, we want to work with you, we want to stay with you, we just need you to meet our demands and kind of lighten up on us a little bit. And that didn't work out. So by the time you get to 1776, the Second Continental Congress wants to draft a Declaration of Independence. So Thomas Jefferson is credited with mainly writing the document. As far as we know historically, that's the author. It formally declared independence from Britain. That is the purpose, was to acknowledge or explain to Britain what they were planning on doing. And it wasn't actually signed on July 4th, so we celebrate America's Independence Day on July 4th. But on July 2nd, they actually declared independence, and then on July 4th, the Congress finalized and accepted the document that would become the Declaration of Independence, but it actually wasn't signed until August 2nd, so a little tidbit for you there. But we can analyze the Declaration of Independence for a couple of reasons. So it can be used to explain colonial grievances, so why the colonists wanted to break away from Great Britain, and it also can be a precursor for its intentions in developing the U.S. government. So there's going to be some pieces in there that are going to be precursors or predictors of the coming U.S. government, or when we get to the Constitution, some things that you can tie back to there. So one question I like to ask is whether the Constitution met the criteria or upheld the principles of the Declaration of Independence. So we'll be looking at that as well. So that's just a little bit of an intro and some historical context. And then I'm going to start you through the assignment, which you should have posted on Teams for at-home assignments. So you're going to want to get that up now and make sure that you have it somewhere while you watch the rest of this. Again, we got the Declaration of Independence. I just wanted to point out that this is a modified version of the Declaration of Independence. So it's not the entire thing. If you like to see the entire thing, you're more than welcome to. I can send it to you. But we kind of just cut down to the main parts that we really want to focus on for our purposes. And then when you get to U.S. government next year, you'll probably look at a bigger part of it as well. So there's three things I would like you to do. First, actually four, I'm sorry. First, we're going to do the origin together. I'm actually going to give you some time to think about it. And then write some ideas down, and then I'll give you some of my ideas, but I'd like you to pause the video when you're doing the origin, so I'll tell you to do that in a second. For the first big paragraph, we're going to stop after every asterisk or little star and write a short little interpretation of the text. That's called chunking, so just making things manageable, especially when they're kind of tough to read, like something that was written back in 1776. When you get to the list of grievances, we're going to write at least 3 connections to other events, and I'll do one with you. And then at the end of the declaration, I'd like you to write a summary on the back in your own words. And I'd like you to keep it to tweet length, or at least the size of an Instagram post caption that people will actually want to read. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about one that you don't need to click see more in order to get the rest of it. Okay, people don't want to read that stuff. So short. All right, first thing I'd like you to do is when we're talking about origin, we're talking about 2 things here. We're either looking at the point of view of the author, so who is the author, or the historical context. I'm going to do both in a second, but I want you to pause me so that you can think of some on your own and write some in that you would do. So who's the author, what's their point of view, and then or the historical context, what's going on at the time. Okay, so I'm going to do point of view. This is obviously from a patriot point of view, okay? It's Thomas Jefferson, which is great that we know that, but we want to think about why does that matter? So why is that significant? So we'll likely make the British actions seem really bad. Okay, it doesn't mean they weren't bad. It just means that that's probably how they're going to be portraying them. So keep that in mind. This is not a loyalist point of view. In terms of historical context, this is 1776. So here are things that we know have already happened. We've already seen all the taxes, Boston Massacre, the Tea Party has happened, and then we've also had Lexington and Concord. So all the way back then. So that was back in 1775. So right now we're thinking like the colonists are pretty much at the end of their rope. This is it for them. So just keeping those things in mind that we know that all these things have happened already. Also 1776, we'll talk a little bit later about this guy Thomas Paine. He wrote a pamphlet called Common Sense, which also made an argument for getting rid of the British or leaving the British. And also Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations, which is like the beginning of capitalism, but that's neither here nor there. Okay, so we're going to go through, we're going to take a look, and every time we get to the asterisk, we're going to just kind of do a little interpretation. So I'm going to do the first two with you, and then I want you to try to do the last one, or I'm going to do the first couple with you. I'm sorry. So I'm going to start here. So this is from the Declaration of the 13 United States of America, and he says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So I'm going to take that part right there. I'm going to try to do a little bit of translation for myself. So I already wrote this comment in here, but when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about what does self-evident mean? What does it mean to be endowed by your Creator with unalienable rights? And then what are they? So I wrote this comment right here, actually. I said, the colonists believe that people have certain rights that cannot be taken away. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's what the colonists are saying right there. So I encourage you to pause me and maybe write that one down, and we'll move along after this. Okay, so sorry, I moved me out of the way here. So the next part he says is that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, which to me means people create the government, deriving their powers from the consent of the government. So there's two things that I'm taking away there. The first is that people create governments. That's the first thing, okay? And then the second thing is deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. So what I commented for that one was that the government only has powers if the people let it. If the government becomes too powerful, the people can get rid of it. So the consent of the governed. You're arguing that, you have to give the government power in order for them to have power. So pause me and take that one down if you need some help with that one. So then he goes on to say that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. So that's where he's talking about that part where he talks about how if the government becomes too powerful, then the people should get rid of it. Laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. That basically means doing what the government wants. This is my favorite part right here, is this section. I love this section right here. So he says, prudence indeed, prudence means like patience or being careful, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. So he means don't change your government just because of random reasons that don't really matter. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So that's kind of a really long one, but what he's saying there is that you shouldn't just get rid of a government just willy-nilly just because you want to. You have to do it for really good reasons, but he is also observing that people tend to suffer like when things become normal And it's easier for them to just keep suffering than it is for people to actually go and make a change and do something. And I think that's so true of human nature, but he was talking about that right there. Okay, so I'm running out a little bit of time on this screencast. So what I would like you to do is I did these first ones, and I would like you to take this little section right there. And if you're not familiar with despotism, it basically kind of means like a dictatorship or a terrible government. And see if you can interpret this last little section in your own words. Okay? If you want to pause me and wait, because I'm going to move on to the next section, you can do that as well. The other thing I wanted you to do is take 3 of these grievances. So now they move into the grievances against the king or against parliament, as we were talking about. And I want you to take 3 of them and try to connect them to another event. If you want a bonus, a little extra, you can do all of them. But try to connect 3 of them to other events. So I'm going to do one with you. Okay, so that means you only have to actually do 2 on your own. So the first thing he says is he as in King George, even though it's Parliament that's done most of these things, he has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. So he's refused to allow these laws to happen in the colonies, even though they're necessary for the public good. You can maybe make a connection to the Intolerable Acts for dissolving the Massachusetts legislature, but this is probably a broader thing. He also says he has called together legislative bodies. Legislative bodies are like lawmaking, like Congress, at unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. So basically, he's making the colonies' governments just do what he wants. Again, not really a direct, again, kind of like Boston Tea Party Intolerable Acts a little bit, but nothing that I've really seen. All right, let's move on to the next one. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing, and I love this part, with manly firmness, his invasions on the rights of the people. All right, this one is pretty direct. So here he's definitely talking about the Intolerable Acts after the Boston Tea Party, because they dissolved the Massachusetts legislature, and that's kind of a big deal. So that one's a more direct connection. These ones kind of allude to it or kind of imply, but this is a direct connection right here. So I just typed it right there. Okay, so you got a few other ones right here. I'd like you to try to connect 2 more to something that happened. We'll talk about this one I italicized because it's kind of important. And then at the end here, this part is really just them saying, okay, we're declaring independence. That's like, if we didn't make it obvious, here it is. Okay, so when you're done with those 2, do a little summary of what the main ideas are, and we'll talk about this when you come back to class. Okay, I'm not going to make you submit this, but if I find out you haven't done it, there's going to be some issues of not keeping up with things. Okay, so make sure you do it. If you have questions, let me know, but feel free to work with your group if you'd like to as well. All right, have fun, stay safe, and we'll talk later.